Hi again. In Edmond Gruss, Apostles of Denial, chapter The Period Under Joseph Franklin Rutherford, the subsection is Years of Doctrinal Change and Expansion. When Rutherford was released from prison in March 1919, he found only a skeleton of the organization which was flourishing before the prison term and the closing of Bethel. In January of 1919, Rutherford had been re-elected president, and shortly thereafter he started a reorganization of the work. In October of 1919, The Golden Age began to be published. This magazine dealt mostly with social matters and current events from the Bible student's viewpoint. Meanwhile, the Watchtower magazine continued its uninterrupted publication. At first, Rutherford hewed closely to the Russellite line, but after a few years new light came, and slowly Russell's writings, person, and books were forgotten. No longer was Russell behind the veil, managing every feature of the harvest work, which, by the way, the Finished Mystery had claimed on page 144. His position had been usurped. Rutherford dealt heavily in his brand of progressive revelation, that is, that God had a definite time to reveal certain biblical facts. Therefore, each of Rutherford's new books revealed some of God's new truth. Rutherford and the Watchtower organization became God's sole dispenser of truth, for God spoke only in revelation to Rutherford and a choice few who just happened to be in the editorial department of the Watchtower magazine. In early attempts at new revelation, Rutherford was bound somewhat to definite time predictions in his exposition and books. As he gained experience, time prediction became more vague, and he dealt more with light on past fulfillments. Progressive revelation revealed that the witnesses and their enemies were found in the pages of the Bible, especially in the Old Testament prophets and the book of Revelation. Rutherford also shifted the emphasis of Russell from the atonement and restitution of all things to the vindication of Jehovah's name, which is still the primary emphasis of the witness movement today. This explains why its message is centered in the Jehovah of the Old Testament and not the Christ of the New Testament. This shift occasioned the new name, Jehovah's Witnesses, which also was needed to give the movement distinction from the approximately 40,000 Bible students that over the years left the movement for one cause or another. The doctrine of Vindication of Jehovah came to crystallization in the 3-volume set Vindication, which is an exposition of the entire book of Ezekiel. In line with the doctrine of progressive revelation, Rutherford writes in the preface of Volume 1 of Vindication, quote, Jehovah caused to be written more than 2,500 years ago what in the Bible is called Ezekiel's prophecy. During the centuries, that prophecy has been a mystery, sealed to all who have sought to unlock it. God's due time has come for the prophecy to be understood. Now, there's a footnote to this where Gruss deals with what Vindication did to overturn the teachings of Russell. Vindication, Volume 1, then 1931, it should be remembered that Rutherford's interpretation of Ezekiel was not the first of the Society's commentaries on the book. The Finished Mystery, 1917, devoted more than 220 pages to the exposition of Ezekiel. Obviously, a new interpretation was needed, as many of the statements in the Finished Mystery were out of date and did not fit the new positions of the Society. The most prominent figure in the exposition is C.T. Russell, and on page 483, the reader is told that Russell was a sign. It is further claimed that Russell was, quote, Christ's representative in the world, the sole steward of the meat in due season, end of quote. Rutherford's statement, in Vindication that is, would seem to repudiate the exposition in the Finished Mystery, the preface of which claims that the quote, book may properly be said to be a posthumous publication of Pastor Russell. That's on page 5. Supposedly, this book was the subject of biblical prophecy, according to pages 167-68. Rutherford's statement, therefore, rejects a text which was prophesied in the Bible. And then Gruss concludes this section with This is the typical approach. The book Life begins with a statement in the foreword, quote, Job is an outstanding character of the Bible. The book bearing his name has long been a mystery, to be understood only in God's time. The signals to the Watchtower as God's channel must have become garbled, for the message of life, as the previous chapter has revealed, was sent to the scrap heap of discarded expositions a short time after it appeared. The new revelations came so fast that the books could no longer keep up with them. An advertisement for the Watchtower in the rear of the book Riches states, quote, too many and too rapid now are these unfoldings of Bible prophecy and truths, so that books cannot be written and published fast enough by the Watchtower Society to present them all. But you can get them in the only magazine of its kind, the Watchtower. Riches, by the way, was published in 1936. Needless to say, it was out of print a few years later. I'll put in a link to Joseph Franklin Rutherford on the apostates, that is, the Russellite apostates, who he called dogs, the synagogue of Satan, the evil slave. This was just in the 1920s and early 30s he was using this language about people who he had been working side by side with just a few years before to honor Charles Taze Russell, who was, of course, not only the faithful and discreet slave, the soul steward, but also the voice of Jehovah in the finished mystery. So I'll put in a link to what Rutherford later had to say about those loyal Russellites. The dogs, the synagogue of Satan, the evil slave, the apostates. See you next time.